Welcome to the Production Talk podcast with me, Jan of mixartist.com.au. In this podcast series, we celebrate the modern way of producing music. We want to talk about all things related to songwriting, recording at home, and music production. So if you produce your music at home, this is the place to be. Please subscribe and recommend this podcast to all your friends. This is the Production Talk podcast, episode 46. Welcome back to another episode of the Production Talk podcast. At the beginning of this episode, I would like to acknowledge the traditional owners and custodians of the country that this following interview is recorded on, and the Arakwal people of the Bundjalung Nation, and pay my respects to elders past, present, and emerging. Let me welcome Eric. Thank you for being with me here today on the podcast.
Thanks for having me, Jan.
I'm so glad we could make that work. We've known each other for a long time, and then over the last couple of years we haven't seen each other enough, and then recently we reconnected, and it's great to see your face again.
Likewise. I mean, it has been a crazy couple years, eh?
Oh yes. How did you get through the COVID years?
Surprisingly good. Like the first 3 months, I think like the whole world was, going, oh, geez, this is, you get anxious, you're worried, you're not sure what's happening. But, we're lucky to be in this country and in this part of the country too. I mean, we were pretty sheltered from it in terms of the direct impact, but obviously everything else, work, life in general, is pretty nuts. But yeah, once we sort of got over that little bump, I think, we settled in and I actually enjoyed being home with the family,
Yeah.
So, being on tour a lot prior to 2020, it was a big change.
Extra family time is always welcome, of course. How do you manage all your work and being a dad as well? Is that challenging at times?
Always.
Always, yeah.
I mean, it's like trying to be present with my family, so really having hard cut-off times for my work, especially when you're working from home. And it's very easy to sneak away and just, jump on a mix for another couple of hours, and then trying to set some boundaries and make sure I am present, to be there for them,
Good. Why don't you just tell us a little bit more about your background? You're a musician yourself. Do you still find time to play occasionally? Yeah, I do for my own sake, and sometimes from a compositional point of view. I like writing and still use guitar and bass for most of my writing. But yeah, so traditionally a guitarist, did everything from classical to reggae to, whatever in between, Latin music and whatnot. So, yeah. Okay. Can you talk about the bands you've been involved with?
The first, I've been a few sort of mediocre cover bands in the early days, but then my I guess biggest band that I was in, or which I started, was called Rastawuki in Sydney, 8-piece sort of reggae / world music band. Yes, bit of a funny name, and at the time we just didn't really take ourselves very seriously. But then things started to happen, and then we're like, oh, all of a sudden we're on festival stages and playing larger venues and touring around the country. So yeah, it was a good fun time.
Okay, and then over the course of your career, you became more and more of a producer and engineer. And is it fair to say that it has turned around a bit more, that you're nowadays more of a producer and engineer than a musician? Is that right?
100%. Yeah. I mean, I made that transition, I guess, after, the band sort of broke up and I went overseas, came back, you reassess things. But the album that we put out, we worked with a fantastic producer called Tony Buchan, who's now based in Los Angeles and still producing some amazing records over there. he kind of took me under the wing and sort of, I was very keen where everyone else went home after they did their takes, or if we were editing or mixing or any of those, I was just there shadowing him the whole time. And he was good enough to be patient with me and allowed me to ask questions and so that was my first, I guess, real taste of jumping in on the production side of things and really just being absorbed by it, and just loving the whole process, to be honest.
And how old were you when that happened?
I was about, what was that, 2004, so 16 years ago. Okay. I was about 23 years old, 22, 23. So I've been playing by that stage as a musician for 8 years already.
Okay.
So performing on stages, should I say. But after 8 years of being a musician, I made that transition, I guess.
Okay. And nowadays you do a lot of live sound? Well, I guess COVID threw a bit of a spanner in the works there, but...
Well, last weekend I was in Darwin, actually, for a festival with a band called Dune Rats.
Cool.
Doing monitors, in-ear monitors. And but I'm actually sort of slowly pulling away from that because I guess, once again, COVID gave me the opportunity to stay home and work, and I thought I kind of rekindled some of those relationships I had before because I was very active in the studio prior. And what led me into, I guess, live sound was the back of an album that I worked with a certain artist, and then they said, hey, can you come on the road with us? And, everything sort of snowballs from there, and next thing you know, you're in, the other side of the world and doing a tour, and you're going, oh, okay, how did I get here? But, it was fun. It was fun, and it was a great learning experience, and I did it for a few years, and I'm still doing it, but I am sort of scaling back that side of my business. I want to focus more back in the studio and mixing.
Yeah, I see. If I may just stick with the live sound for a second. So you said that you mix some monitors. So I think mixing monitors for the stage is probably the harder job of the two, in contrast to front of house in some situations, I guess. And if we then look at the complexity, you've worked with the Melbourne Ska Orchestra.
Yeah.
Can it get any more challenging than that? How many musicians are in that band?
It can
north of 20?
Yeah, north of 20. It can range anywhere between, I think the minimum amount that they claim that can still be classified as an orchestra, I think, is 18.
Oh, okay.
But it goes up to, I think, the biggest show I did with Melbourne Ska was like 34, 35 musicians on stage.
Wow.
So they just scale up, every section essentially.
And how many different foldback sounds did you have to provide for that?
That one I go between 10 and 12 mixes. You sort of split the mixes in sections, and then any solo artist or say the lead horn player or reed player of that section generally gets their own monitor mix, and obviously the vocalists get their own monitor mix. But then, side fill would be 11 and 12. And then that way, I guess we can just give them a general vibe on stage, but nothing too crazy because, it's punishing for the front of house engineer to try and manage that. So, yeah.
Well, look, I've seen that band many times, and it's quite unbelievable to, manage that many speakers on stage and musicians with all kinds of different demands. So to me, this seems to be the most challenging job I can imagine in live sound.
It keeps you on your toes, that's for sure.
Yeah. Okay. So when you do gigs like, the gig in Darwin now, the Dune Rats, how many musicians have you got there? Is that four piece?
So go from 30 to 3. It's a three piece. So drums, bass, and guitar.
Each one with their own foldback. So that must be like a cruisy gig for you, I guess.
Yeah, and to be honest, the foldback are just the backup. They're on in-ears. So,
yeah, right.
Feedback's no longer a real issue. and it's mainly just a bit of kick and snare going through the wedges just to give them a little bit of substance on stage so that it doesn't feel light, and a bit through the side fills too if it's a festival, because it's usually a larger stage.
And I know that a lot of musicians struggle with in-ears at first because it sounds so very different to what they're used to. How do you get musicians comfortable with their in-ears?
I guess, I mean, there's different aspects, but I mean, you know, a lot of the musicians that I've worked with, I guess they've been very well trained in that area. I guess they've already sort of done the hard yards. But the few that I have worked with where it's very new to them, you know, using ambience mics to sort of bleed a little bit of the space around them makes them feel a little bit more comfortable. And during that transition, generally we still keep the monitor mix pretty much, you know, going. And so if they want to pop an ear out, they can still have a monitor. So that's kind of, you know, and then eventually you sort of wean them off.
Wean them off.
Wean them off the monitor.
Like a slow crossfade.
That's it.
From one to the other.
But, you know, once they realize the benefits, and that's, you know, there's so many benefits with in-ear monitors. Also doing front of house engineering. If I have a band on stage that are on in-ear monitors, you have so much more control for the audience mix, you know. And
can you explain why?
Well, the least amount of bleed on stage, the better, you know. If you keep a stage quiet, you've got way more control with your mics, and you can control the dynamic range a lot more, and not so much spill coming off stage, you know. Generally, you know, these good bands that know how to do it and want the best experience for their audience will, you know, even their guitar amplifiers are quite low on stage, you know. That's why we have a mic in front of it, you know, and sometimes a Palmer DI coming out of the back of the head too, just to get the DI head signal. Or some bands go completely digital and they use Kemper amp simulators. So, yeah, all those things actually really embellish the show for the audience, for the front of house mix. It just makes a world of a difference keeping that stage volume down. Okay.
So in other words, you can compress the vocals a bit harder without getting all the negatives of more guitar spill and, you know, cymbals and all the wash you get.
100%, yeah.
Yeah, right. And that makes a show pretty much cleaner and punchier and more transparent.
Yeah, transparent, more three-dimensional, I guess, you know, because you can get a bit more separation too, which is good.
Yeah, fantastic. And you mentioned that you also set up audience microphones to feed it into the in-ears. Yep. Tell us more about that.
Yeah, I mean, you know, it's a very common practice, and generally, especially at festivals, these days they'll have the house techs will have them set up and you just patch into theirs, you know, unless your artist specifically wants a certain type of microphone, whether they be shotguns or small diaphragm condensers. But yeah, it's just to give them a bit of buzz when in between songs. I'll have the ambient mics on, audience mics on a VCA and just push it up into everyone's ears, you know, or a call and response. That, you know, they want to hear the crowd respond a bit more, and I'm just writing that VCA fader to give them that. So generally during the show, I have maybe a small blend of it, or sometimes none at all, depending on what, you know, how focused they want to be in the song. Because some of those shotgun mics, you can literally hear someone having a conversation and it just throws the artist. Like someone in the front rows, you know, going, oh, you know, and then it's like you can actually hear the conversation. It's incredible how much they can pick up. And yeah, I mean, not that I ever have it very loud to start with, but yeah, it does throw them off if they feel like, hey,
it can be irritating.
Yeah.
I see, of course. Who knows? They might even be talking about the band.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, right. So basically what you try to get with those mics is more the overall sound of the venue.
Yeah, and crowd reactions. Yeah, totally. I mean, yeah, I find another trick is a lot of the musicians on stage like a little bit of overheads, you know, from the drums, and that kind of gives them a similar feel on stage, you know.
Bit of space, yeah.
Yeah, so, and being panned left and right, having stereo mixes means that they do have a sense of space around them, so yeah.
Yes, I can see that, yeah. And it's amazing because they can run around the stage and they carry their sound with them.
Yeah.
So they don't need to stick to their place on stage where they hear themselves well. If they run away, they can still hear
right,
them,
yeah.
climb up.
Super consistent.
Yeah, cool. Nice. Okay, and you've also worked a lot in studios.
Yeah.
So do I remember correctly that you did do some work at 301 at some stage?
Yeah, in Byron, before they shut down there, I did a record with Kingfisher from Brisbane as a recording engineer, working with producer Jake Savona at the time. And yeah, that was great to have the opportunity to work on that old Neve beautiful festival board there before it got taken away and it went to Sydney, I believe, to Alexandria. And so, yeah, it was a great little, I mean, let's face it, we don't necessarily need a Neve board to get a good recording, but boy, it's fun to use.
Yeah.
And the tones,
Oh, yeah. I can relate to that, yeah. And you worked with Jake, who was on the last episode of this podcast, more than that. So tell us more about the other adventures.
Well, funnily enough, during that recording with Kingfisher is when Jake found out that he received a grant to do this recording project, and he was telling us about it in the studio during a break. And so when he was talking about the ideas about, going to Cuba and taking some Jamaican musicians, and all of a sudden I'm just standing there going, what? This sounds incredible. You got to take me. I speak Spanish. I know Latin music. I know Cuban music. I know reggae. I know Jamaican culture. Mate, I'm your man, as a joke. And he just, laughed it off and, yep, no worries. And then 2 or 3 weeks after that recording project, I get a call from him and he says, hey, so do you want to come to Cuba? And I'm like, you sure? Are you for real? And he's like, yeah, man, I think it'd be great, and just be great to have someone I can trust and who can communicate to both the Cuban musicians and the Jamaican musicians, and not only just as a translator, but someone knows technically what is required and etc. So next thing you know, my ticket's booked to go to Jamaica first. So we went to Jamaica to do a bit of pre-production, and then we got all the musicians together, Sly and Robbie, guitarist called Bopey, and some younger sort of up-and-coming Jamaican artists at the time. Got on a plane and flew to Havana, Cuba. And the project, we flew from Kingston to Havana, and the project's obviously called Havana Meets Kingston. So, yeah, very apt name for what we were doing. But, yeah, and then we spent just over a week at Egram Studios in Cuba, which is the same studio where Buena Vista Social Club was recorded, and Ry Cooder's done many projects there, I believe, since then. An amazing space. I mean, it is old. It is a bit run down. It does have that feeling of, Cuba not having access to all the resources that they used to, since the embargo in the 50s. But they definitely make do, and the music is what counts, I guess,
Tell us more about that studio. What does it look like? How big is it? How many rooms have they got?
So it's picture it as like a large wooden hall almost, with the ceilings approximately 6.5 to 7 meters high, so quite high. All the walls have wooden diffusers like everywhere. So it's just wooden floorboards, wooden diffusions. There's not one bit of absorption in that room whatsoever. It's just all diffusion. But the wood is so nice. You can even smell it. It's almost like, you can smell the age of the timber in there, and the creaky floorboards, which weren't so great during a session or a take, but you just work around that. But they had three booths towards the back of the room, which could fit a drum kit, but very, very tightly. Yeah, so they had three booths towards the back of the room, and yeah, pretty small, maybe 3 by 3 roughly, if that. So yeah, we use those for isolation booths, but I had to come up with a plan pretty quickly in terms of how to manage the session and the recordings. And, you know, from my experience with reggae and dub music, you know, it's a little bit like my headspace goes towards militant, dry, tough, tight sounding, you know, not very roomy at all. You know, it's yeah, sure, you get a bit of spill here or there, but the room has to be less of a feature, you know. Yeah. Whereas Cuban music, on the other hand, the room is the key to making that percussion and those horns and all those other, and even the Steinway piano that was in the main room. You know, room was key to that sound, right? To what I hear on a lot of those records that Ry Cooder did with Buena Vista Social Club, for example. And so I just treated that as my goal, is like, okay, get the Jamaicans in the back room. And so I had Sly in one of those booths. I had Bongo Herman, the percussionist, in another booth. And then I had another percussion set up in one of the other rooms. We tried putting the guitar amp in there, but then we were kind of short, so we just went DI on the guitar and decided to reamp later, because in the main room we had all the percussion, congas, timbales, the Cuban drum kit, the Steinway piano. Now, all of these elements weren't always playing at the same time, of course, but yeah, we were just trying to minimize, you know, having a lot of that spill. But a lot of the percussion elements were all live with all that spill happening, and man, I have to give it to those Cuban musicians. They're amazing. You listen to it and it turns into glue straight away. Like, it just doesn't need much at all. Like, once it's tracked, it's done, sort of thing, which is crazy. And the room sounds great, you know. So it works really well with percussive elements. And yeah, and then same with the Steinway piano. Just amazing. I just had a pair of Neumann, what were they? U89s over the piano itself, just with the lid open. And then the room mic was a U87. We had everything. They had 4 U47 FETs available.
Wow.
Yeah, and they were from the 50s. Like, so I think it was stuff that was left over after the revolution.
Wow.
Yeah. And same with the pianos. Like, they just had amazing access to pianos, which I think from what I was told, they were just taken out of a lot of those really luxurious hotels after the revolution, and they distributed those pianos to the people, you know, like into studios and music schools and things like that. So everyone could learn on a Steinway if they wanted to, you know. So yeah, pretty incredible. Amazing.
There's a lot of history.
Yeah, amazing history there. It is surreal. Like, you know, you like everything you would have seen, of course, is all the old cars, and the center of Havana is absolutely beautiful with these amazing, opulent, architectural buildings, you know, that are amazing. They have, you can tell there was a lot of money going through that place at once upon a time. And obviously now it's a bit rough around the edges because things have deteriorated, but it still has that historic opulence from that bygone era, you know, which they still keep alive with the old cars and just, yeah, keeping that culture alive. It's amazing.
And how many inputs were you recording at the same time, approximately?
I was limited to 24 inputs. They had a old 192 IO. They had an O2R, which was quite faulty, and I had 2 Focusrite Octo Pre's, the silver face, really older ones without the dynamics, very scratchy pots. So very, very, they had an AMAC console right there sitting in front of me, teasing me, but it wasn't operational. The power supply was gone. And and they also had a Studer A80 staring at me. But once again, they just didn't have the parts to maintain and replace things. So we had to make do with very, very basic preamps.
Yeah, right.
But very good room, very good musicians, and very good quality microphones. So, at the end of the day, instead of worrying about, geez, I wish I had a better preamp or a Neve or a this or a that, I just had to rely on good placement and then let the performers do the rest, and then just set the gains. You couldn't really ride the gains because, unfortunately, every time you'd move a gain pot, it would just crackle like crazy. And I'm trying to take all the dust out of them, and I'm taking the caps off and see if I can, I didn't have a can of deoxit or anything like that with me. Or rubbing alcohol or anything. It was like isopropyl alcohol. But, yeah, it was just it wasn't very well maintained and, constantly having to work around those limitations. But, I think that was probably like a good thing in this regard. And, yeah, to be honest, I just focused more on the musicians, and that's where it's key, I reckon, in a project like this too.
That's where the priorities are. So looking at what most people have in their home studios today, they probably would have better quality gear than what you recorded through.
100%. Yeah, 100%. So,
Wow.
If you talk about those Focusrite Pre's, I reckon, you could probably get one secondhand for $150 these days if you can even find one.
That's right. They're so old, yeah.
Yeah. So, but yeah, I mean, not everyone has a mic cabinet with 4 U47 FETs though.
That's true. That's true. Yes. Okay. So that made up for it.
That made up for it.
But, once you've got the performance and the microphones in the room, then even cheap gear couldn't break it anymore. It was just
that's right.
Amazing, yeah.
That's right. As long as we got a clean signal and we could capture it without any problems, then that was the key.
Do you remember how you gain staged your recording signals? Have you got any workflows that you can share with us? How to tackle something like such a big recording project?
Well, I mean, look, I did have the house technician there who had way more experience than I did in regards to, Cuban style recording in that room and whatnot. And a lot of the times, I would go over to, his name was Alex, and I'd look at him and I'd say, "Oh, what do you normally do in this situation?" And I'd be positioning a mic, and he goes, "Exactly what you're doing." Like we became very good buddies by the end of it, realizing that we just both want the same thing. We were caring more about the music rather than, what technique and this and that. It was literally, put the musician in the right spot. And if it was too hot, the first choice was to back off the microphone a little bit, and do that rather than, worry too much. I mean, I didn't have dynamics. I didn't have EQ. I did in the box in Pro Tools, of course, but that's already after it's been captured. So essentially I just worked with mic position, and also, if I had a group vocal or the horn section, for example, it was just literally, going on the talkback and saying, "Hey, can you just move your chair back maybe just 1 foot back, please?" And, the trombone player, for example, because he was just a bit louder than everyone else, and my gain was set nicely already, and I was liking it, and I was like, oh, I just feel like he's overloading the capsule a bit, rather than the preamp, So if he just backs off, not so much air hitting that capsule, and then, it'll probably sound a little bit more natural and rah, and so.
Yeah, right. So you basically gain stage the horn section with the feet.
Yeah, just make them move,
Yeah, cool.
Because we had different horn players for different parts and different sections, but using the same mics. So once they were set, those gains, and I was really happy with them, I'd rather the musician slightly move forward or backwards. And I'm talking, 20 centimeters, 30 centimeters, nothing drastic, you're not going to get a direct sounding mic and then all of a sudden a roomy sounding mic, It was just small amounts just to sort of balance it out a little bit and make sure the mic wasn't overloading or I didn't have to do too many drastic changes on the gains just because I didn't have much flexibility there, so.
And do you remember what microphones you used for the horn section?
U47s, 4 U47s.
Yeah, right.
Or the trumpet, we had the U89. So they had, I'll share a photo with you actually. You can share with your listeners. But
oh, cool. I'll put it in the show notes.
Yeah, so I've got a photo of the mic cabinet. And so they had 6 U89s, 4 U47 FETs, and then a couple other, obviously your Shaws and your 57s and a couple Sennheisers and whatnot. And then Jake brought his U87, and I brought a little TLM Neumann just in case for whatnot. And but yeah, so
okay.
So with those mics, we basically, depending on what we were doing that particular day, we'd utilize the same microphones and just place them somewhere else for a different part. They're very versatile. I mean, those mics. You can put just about anything in front of them, and they're going to work. As long as you place it the right distance, and happy days.
Cool. So you used mainly condenser microphones in this case.
Yeah. So for anything other than the drums and the guitar, for the reamping especially, everything else was condenser.
Yeah, right. That's where you get all that detail and the quality and the roominess, I guess.
Yeah, definitely.
That's what they're good for, yeah.
Definitely.
Do you remember how much distance you left between the horn section and the mics? I find that condensers can be a little bit problematic with air movement.
Yeah. Depending on the horn, of course, like, saxophones could be a little bit closer, less air movement, but the trombone and especially the trumpet, in some cases over a meter, 1.2, 1.3 meters roughly. And because some of these players, they can blow, man. Like
they're loud.
Like just acoustically speaking, I reckon some of the SPL coming out of that trumpet would have been at least 120 dB. If you were a meter away from it, you'd be having ringing ears,
Yeah, right. Okay.
So they'd really hit those big high notes, like with full power,
Well, that's what you want, That's where the sound comes from.
Totally,
I guess. Yeah.
Totally.
Did you use pop filters for those mics?
For the vocals, yeah. On the horns, I think on the sax, if I remember correctly, we potentially used one because we were a bit closer to the source. But yeah, mainly the vocals, obviously. And then, everything else was pretty clean, so it didn't require too much pop filters. Yeah.
Okay. So how many musicians did you record at the same time? You said drums, bass, guitar, percussion, horn sections. So I'm counting probably something like 7, 8 or...
The bed tracks being drums, bass, keys, guitar, percussion, that would have been somewhere in the 1, 2, 3, about 7 to 8 musicians at a time for the bed tracks.
Wow.
The horn section was 4 players at a time, and then overdub any solos or harmonies, additional harmonies, or just to thicken up certain sections or whatever. And then vocals, 1 person at a time generally, unless there was like a duet or backing a group vocal type thing, which we did a few times. We did a few group vocal sections, and that went up to 5 to 6 people in a group vocal, and sort of did a circular sort of setup in that regard. So yeah, I mean, 7 to 8 people, but at any given moment, the studio had probably about 15. It was like a party. I'd have Cubans drinking rum behind me. You know,
Yeah, right.
and
of course, you would never have contributed to that.
no,
would you?
no, I couldn't actually, because my brain felt like it was melting, because I was constantly managing the technical task, of course, of doing this recording, and I was putting so much energy into that, but also constantly having to speak in Spanish. And now my parents are from Argentina, so I grew up speaking Spanish at home, and I speak pretty fluently. But the thing is, still, English is my main language. You know, I live in Australia, so speaking Spanish still requires a little bit more energy for me.
Yeah, focus.
And more focus. But then also just constantly having to communicate between the Jamaican musicians and the Cuban musicians, and also not only just translating something, but also communicating what is that musical idea, and how do you actually, you know, sometimes it makes perfect sense in Spanish, but to make it sort of understandable in English, or even to a Jamaican with their patois and their different culture, it's like trying to, you know, I'd have to sing stuff to them, or over the talkback, you know, or walk into the room and explain to, you know, I couldn't believe it, but I was explaining to Sly Dunbar, one of the most experienced drummers, reggae drummers ever, that the Cubans were doing a, you know, son clave, which has a bit of a swing to it. So basically, you know, clapping out the clave and saying, no, they're not dragging it. It's actually the third beat's anticipated, and da-da-da. You know?
Oh, okay.
And sort of all those types of little things to sort of like, you know, just get that interface happening between the two musical styles and the cultural styles. So language being one thing, but obviously music's another language.
Of course, yeah.
And so, just interfacing that. But 90% of the time, it was incredible how much they could just communicate just by playing. You know, they'll just instead of talking it out, the Cubans would just play something, you know, and just tap it out in front of Sly, and Sly goes, yeah, man, no worries, yeah, and then get back on the kit, and then off they went. You know, like it didn't require words.
Oh, cool.
So,
well, that really sounds like you were juggling quite a few different things there. You know, 24 inputs, dodgy or crackly pots. That by itself keeps you busy, and you know, then managing this many musicians. And I guess your skills from the Melbourne Ska Orchestra probably would have come handy as well to provide foldback or headphone mixes to 7 to 8 musicians at the same time.
100%. Yeah, that did come in handy.
Did they demand separate mixes, or were they all in the same?
They were in groups. Yeah. So we'd have little headphone splitter boxes going to, say, two to three musicians. So if you're in the percussion section, they were all happy to be on the one headphone mix.
Yeah.
Drummer Sly was on a different mix.
Okay.
And so they did. I can't remember exactly how many headphone sends we had available, but yeah, we made it work. Everyone was happy.
Okay. And the headphone sends, were they all driven from the digital mixer, from the O2R, or out of Pro Tools? Or?
We did it out of Pro Tools, going out of the line outputs to headphone amplifiers. Yeah. So,
okay.
And that way, we could get a few additional mixes that way. And then on that note, I would put a little bit of processing before it hit their ears. But, you know, being on a HD system, I'll just kept it very minimal, maybe just slight filtering, tiny bit of dynamics, and maybe a touch of verb on an aux bus, and that was it. Just not that they needed reverb, to be honest. There was the room tone alone was enough. But maybe for a vocalist or something like that, you know, just give them a bit of vibe.
Yeah, right. Okay, so you had a Pro Tools HD rig there?
Yeah. So funny that it was a cracked version of Pro Tools. They had the hardware.
Nobody say a thing.
I mean, it is Cuba. Come on. So I mean, look, they just have to be resourceful with whatever they can, and I think for them sometimes, you know, not doing stuff the correct way but still getting a result was more important, you know.
Of course, and that's understandable.
But yeah, I mean, look, they had a Leslie they had a Hammond B3 and a Leslie in there that hasn't turned on in 7 years, you know, because they haven't got the right parts to and like there were so many of these things where I was like, oh, it just would be great to, you know, fly over a technician with a whole shipping container full of parts and just go around Cuba and fix everything for them and leave enough spares. But I mean, yeah, I guess that's a logistical thing that would be hard to do. But yeah, just, you know, they can keep their cars going. You know, you got cars in the 50s going, and I guess they can be a bit more, you can machine a part or something, you know.
Yeah,
but
that's right.
When it comes to audio gear, you know, replacing a tube or a certain bit of componentry is a little bit more difficult to source.
Yeah, that's right. And it's you don't get the same quantity, you know. Who needs spare parts for an AMAC console?
Yeah.
Against who needs a new muffler for a car?
That's right.
You know, that makes a difference, I'm sure. Yeah.
That's right.
What a trip. How much time did it take for you to set it up, to basically go from bumping into the studio, setting everything up, sound check, to actually tracking?
First day was probably a good 6 hours before we started tracking. There was a lot of things that we were managing, not just, you know, the setup. It was, you know, we are in Cuba. The studio had to be paid up front, and getting access to a bank and that amount of money was proving to be a bit difficult. So we had people running around different banks to try and get money out and or changing US dollars to Cuban to cooks, is what they call it. Cuban, I forgot what it's called, credits, essentially. So those little difficulties, and I just went in there, and luckily, because I can speak Spanish, and I butted up the studio manager enough to allow me to start setting up. And I said, look, if he doesn't come to pay for the studio in time, it was, you know, one of those first day teething periods, you know, where you're in a different country and it's not a normal, you know, country where you can just go to an ATM or just give them a credit card or anything like that. It just doesn't work that way in Cuba. So essentially, yeah, while that was all being sorted out, I luckily, you know, managed to get everything set up, line checked, headphones checked, set up a template in Pro Tools, got the musicians comfy, dialed in some sounds, mainly the Jamaicans too, you know, because they, you know, obviously it's all new for them being in a different country. For all of them, it was the first time that they went to Cuba, even though it's like 100 miles away, you know.
Yeah.
It's like another world for them too. After about 6 hours, we finally got music down on Pro Tools, you know, and
that's quick.
Yeah.
6 hours for such a big setup.
Yeah, I mean, we didn't have all the other elements set up at that stage. It was just literally the rhythm section, so mainly just the drums, bass, and guitar at that point. So piano wasn't mic'd up, or, you know, all those other elements weren't mic'd up. So yeah, it was just getting a bit of a rhythm section happening. And then as we went along, we just added the other parts that we needed as we went. And then, yeah, by the end of that day, I think we felt comfortable enough. It wasn't the most productive day. Usually the first day is never the most productive. It's a setup. But the second day we could come in, fire everything up, and pretty much get stuck into tracking. So
that's good. And did the band travel with their own drum set, or did you use the house kit there?
We used the house kit, and it wasn't up to Sly's standard, let's just say, but he is an amazing human being that can make anything sound great. We had to tweak it a fair bit to try and get the kick drum wasn't particularly, you know, it was like a 18 or 19 inch kick drum, and usually he plays a 22 inch kick drum for reggae.
Yes.
So we took the reso head off and tried different ways of tuning, and, you know, sort of try to get a little bit more out of the kick that we were kind of limited to. And, you know, once again,
not much chunk,
not much chunk. So once again, we were limited to what we could get, you know, like I mean, there's no
Make do, yeah.
There's no Billy Hyde's drum hire down the road. There's no, you basically have to borrow from another musician, and then, and so the other drummer there, the Cuban drummer Oliver, had his kit, and his kit was amazing, immaculate. And unfortunately on day one, I had no idea that the two kits were designated, or one, I thought it was just for the session, and we were hiring these two kits. And I kind of piecemealed one for Sly out of the two kits to make it a better kit for Sly. And then when Oliver rocked up, he wasn't too happy about that. So I had to apologize profusely and sort of say, you don't want to sort of piss off the musician, especially the locals, So yeah, I had to appease him pretty quickly, but he was very understanding, and he could see where we were coming from, and understood, and he was there to help out. And he goes, "Oh, actually, you know what? You can use that floor tom and that snare for." I mean, Sly brought his own snare and some cymbals, of course, and his own sticks. Of course, he's got a few things. He doesn't use a drum stool. He sits on his drum case that he brings his snare and other bits on.
Oh, really?
And that's his thing.
No way.
Even on live performances. Yep.
That sounds uncomfortable.
Yeah, but that's what he likes, and it's like his actual case. He sits on it. Yeah. So, but yeah, look, we made it work, and look, you're in a foreign country with limited resources, but I think everyone was willing to, make it work with what they had, and
of course,
not sort of be precious about it all.
And for a production like this, how many productive hours do you get out of a day? How many hours can you work until everybody sort of drops off a bit? And
well, me personally, like we had the studio for 12 hours a day. That was strict. Like they basically gave us access from, I think it was 10 a.m. to 10 p.m.
Okay.
And we did occasionally go over, but that 12 hours I was on the whole time.
Yeah, right. Well, that's good that they put a cap on.
Yeah.
Good for you.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. It was 12 hours for me, but yeah, the musicians weren't on for 12 hours because we had rotating roster of musicians, essentially, Sometimes the Jamaicans would take a break. They'd leave the studio for an hour or two, and we'd overdub some percussion or double bass.
Yep.
Or piano or whatnot. And so when we're doing those overdubs, they're having a break, and then they'd come later that evening after a meal or something, and then we'd, lay down some other tracks. But we generally tried to get most of the beds done in the first few days. But of course, as things developed, and Jake, the producer, had all these charts and ideas, and just also allowing the musicians to come up with their own sort of interpretations and bits and pieces. So, we ended up recording, I think it was 25 songs in that 7-day period.
Wow. That's very productive.
Yeah.
Especially with that many musicians.
That's right. And, and I got to hand it to Jake. He did a lot of prep before arriving to Cuba. It was months and months and months of preparation for him to have that, in place, and that plan in place. And he had it from the onset, the idea of recording enough for 2 albums, because even though a lot of additional tracking was required after Cuba, featured artists, featured vocalists.
Yes.
Overdubbing Ernest Ranglin, for example, on one of the songs, his amazing guitar work. 420 San Miguel, what a tune. And, so all those overdubs obviously were going to happen later, but, to really utilize those days there in Cuba and all these amazing musicians and that space and that room and all those things, it was just an amazing feat to get that all done in 7 days, and no one, no one blew a gasket, let's just say. Everyone loved it.
I was just about to ask if there was friction at any times, but...
there was definitely friction at times, but, that I think that comes with anything,
Yeah.
especially when you put a lot of people in one space, and there's different ideas floating about. There's always going to be some friction, but incredibly, it was mostly smooth sailing. Everyone was super happy,
Cool.
and excited about this project. Like it was. There was this spark in the air, all the musicians, no one was yawning and going, oh, I'm just here to do another take, give me my money and I'm out of here sort of thing. No, everyone was really invested into the actual whole idea and very passionate about it. So it was, great to see.
Well, and, the results speak for themselves. So when the first album came out, Havana Meets Kingston Part 1, it made a huge splash. It was, internationally, worldwide recognized and had a fair bit of success. So were you involved in the touring afterwards as well?
Yeah, so luckily Jake got me along for the touring side of things. So the initial tour was in Australia, where it was almost identical to the lineup in the studio. Not every single musician, because we did use many musicians, but it was all the core players were there. So we did have Sly and Robbie and Barbarito Torres, Rolando Luna, the pianist from Buena Vista Social Club, and Barbarito from Buena Vista Social Club. Julito Padron, the trumpet player, amazing trumpet player. Bo P, the guitarist, rest in peace. And yeah, so we had the core elements from the actual recording for that Australian tour, which was quite a massive task. I mean, if you think about it, each one of those musicians in their own right have their own releases, have their own bands, have their own stardom.
Their own schedules, so to align all of these for a tour.
Logistically was quite a feat to get all those people together. And then also just to keep everyone happy, because they are used to a certain degree of, I guess, treatment, being their own star in their own right, So it was an all-star band if you think about it. So that amazing, but also tricky to logistically navigate and keep it rolling well. But we did it. And we got some fantastic, reviews and accolades from that tour. And then about a year after that, we did Europe with a slightly different lineup. Not everyone being available, and also costs come into play and all those things. So, but yeah, the European tour, we still had a lot of those core musicians in there still. No Sly and Robbie, unfortunately. So we had a different drummer and bass player, but they did an amazing job, and were very invested in the project. And so the European tour in 2018 was amazing, and one of the highlights for me, and a bucket list, I guess, for any sound engineer, was to mix a show at the Royal Albert Hall. And that was also televised on BBC and recorded. So they did like a little doco kind of intro to it, and then the show was aired, broadcast. So that was amazing. That was something that I just walked away from going, I can't believe we just did that, and so did the whole band. And, everyone was just massive buzz, amazing night.
Fantastic. And look, by the time this interview is published, part 2 is already out. So it's coming out this Friday.
That's right.
It's 2 days from today as we record, but by the time this episode is out on Tuesday, it's already out. Which one is your favorite song?
Jeez. I mean, I did mix the Havana Meets Kingston song with Brendan Navarrete as the lead vocalist, so I do enjoy that.
Okay, good.
That was one of the singles that came out earlier on. I don't know. It's hard because I'm one of those guys where I can see the beauty in every song, and I know the story behind the song. So something always grabs me about the different song and remember that moment when that person was playing that part, or, you know, or just even on the road, like the conversation I had with one of the musicians. Like I have a very biased view.
That's okay.
But yeah, I'd say Havana Meets Kingston, or probably that one for now. Let's say for now, for this week.
For now.
Next week will be another tune.
Well, look, I'm sure this record will again make a huge splash, and it will be noticed internationally. That's pretty clear to me. The music is just phenomenal. The musicianship is ridiculously beautiful. Can you talk about the plans for the future? Is there anything possibly in the pipeline that you are comfortable talking about? Any other tours planned or public appearances of any shape or form?
No, not. No, look, to be honest, I'm sort of becoming a little bit of a hermit at the moment. No, look, I mean, you know, after those years of recording, I mean, I did, and I'm not meaning to name drop here, but I have had the opportunity to record with Angus and Julia Stone, and then that's what led into a lot of the touring work too from those guys. But you know, ever since sort of I moved away from, I guess, touring and recording. I mean, I love recording. I feel like recording to me is kind of like doing a live show in a way. You're capturing a moment, and that moment in time will live from that point onwards. You know, and it's a beautiful thing to be a part of. But I guess, yeah, like my priorities have shifted a lot, and I mean, you know, you can see where we live here in this amazing just view out here, looking out the mountains.
The view is pretty spectacular from your place.
I mean, I have to say I love just being home and the community around here, and I just became more of I like getting into the local community, getting involved with the kids' school. I know it sounds a bit daggy, but yeah, I don't know. That's just something. I know
exactly where you're coming from. I feel the same.
and so the like my studio downstairs is just about finished. I just finished all the construction side of things, so now it's really just you know, embellishing it with some nice acoustic treatment. I've got some diffusers in there already.
Nice.
But yes, I'm going to get some absorption panels made up and to size, and you know, get it all done to incrementally, because I would like to test the room as I go, rather than just put a whole bunch of acoustic treatment in there and hope for the best. So I'm going to do some measurements and, you know, slowly add to it as required. But yeah,
I see where that's going. Yeah, you are a bit of a perfectionist in some ways.
I've got my Earthworks microphone ready to go, and and
so this studio is going to be operational probably within weeks, or are we talking still many months?
Probably a couple months before I'm, I guess, settled in. Let's just say. So I'm planning to move my gear down there probably within the next few weeks, and then start that process of, you know, getting the acoustic treatment done right. And so, yeah, that's going to take a few more months of making sure that that's feeling right, and taking measurements, not just, you know, obviously my ears are going to do a lot of the talking, but I always like to confirm what I hear with some proper room measurements and
scientific results.
I want scientific results, exactly. I want to make sure that where my head is, I'm not getting too much of one thing or the other. But so that's been where a lot of my time's been going in. So I guess from you know, that point of view, and I've been doing a lot of the work myself, I guess. It's been enjoyable, but also it's much cheaper doing the labour yourself if you can do it, if you have the capability to. So, and I have, it's been great seeing it come together. I've taken a couple sort of videos, time-lapse videos of, you know, the walls going up or the ceilings coming in or the windows getting in and double glazing and this and that. So, so a lot of the energy going there, and then once I settle in there, I hope to, you know, really push for, you know, getting some of the people that I've been working with in the past to come and, you know, hang out and
make something.
And let's make something, you know. But I mean, potentially some recording too down there. But you know, I'm treating it more as a mixing / project space, or you know, like if people want to finish writing something, or we would need to work on something, the arrangement or whatnot, that's cool. But I don't want it to be like a recording studio as such. I mean, you could fit a band in there, but it's probably better just to go to somewhere like Rocking Horse or the Music Farm, or you know, using these amazing local studios that we have access to.
Yeah, they're definitely well fitted for a lot of noise.
Totally.
Say, if somebody wanted to reach out to you and work with you, how could somebody find you? Have you got a website or social media channels?
I do have a website, so it's ericcoelho.com.au, which I just literally finally got done. I've always been a person of word of mouth, and then a lot of people go, "Oh, can I see some of your work?" And I'm like, send them a link to Spotify or Apple Music or whatever, and it's not the most efficient way to show them my work. So I had to grow up and put my big pants on and get a website done.
Cool.
So yeah, there's that. I'm not huge on social media. I should probably change that. My wife always says, "Eric, you gotta get involved." But yeah, definitely my website, somewhere you can get in touch and see some or hear some of the work that I've done.
The amazing work, yeah.
Yeah, so I have some links there. But yeah, mind you, I'm constantly improving on things. And
okay,
yeah.
Look, if you're interested in reaching out to Eric and maybe just for a chat, or who knows, maybe for a mixed down session or recording session one day, so go to the show notes. I'm going to put the link there. Just click straight on the link and you'll find him. And hopefully the studio will blow up big time and get you a lot of business and, you know, amazing music made. So,
thank you, man.
Eric, thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate you sharing all of this with us. And everybody, please check out Havana Meets Kingston Part 2, Eric's work. It's phenomenal music. So thank you so much.
Awesome. Thanks, Jan.
Cheers.
Pleasure.
Thank you so much, Eric. Amazing stuff. Thank you for all your insight into the production and recording of Havana Meets Kingston. If you're new to the podcast, please go to the previous episode, number 45, where we had an interview with Mr. Savona, the producer behind this project. These episodes go really well together, and definitely head down to the show notes to follow the link to the Havana Meets Kingston Part 2 album. Click there, have a listen. It's out now. It's phenomenal. I just listened to it this morning and it's stunning. Amazing musicianship. Sounds phenomenal. So definitely worth checking out. You can also check out Eric's website, which is also in the show notes. So if you need anybody to help you out with your sound, Eric is warmly recommended. I've known him for many years and I trust him blindly. You're going to be in very good hands if you work with him. In the meantime, please subscribe to the podcast. And do me a huge favor, please. Think about all the friends you know. And I'm pretty sure that you do know some fellow musicians who would benefit from the things we discuss in this podcast. And please do me a big, big favor and pass this podcast on to 1 or 2 people that you know and give them a recommendation. Tell them to please tune in and subscribe to this podcast to spread the message. This will definitely help me to keep this podcast going for the long run. So thank you very much for your word of mouth. I really appreciate this. If you ever need any help finishing your projects, if you need help mixing, you can also reach out to me via mixartist.com.au, my website, where I offer online mixing services, and maybe just have a look at the listen section where you can check out my previous work, or I also warmly recommend to just read through the reviews that I've received from previous clients to just get a sense of, you know, what it would be like. So thank you for considering all of this. Please subscribe, please pass the message on and recommend this podcast to all your friends. This is all for today. I speak to you again next week. Have a fantastic week. Bye for now.